My daughter has become a degenerate after finding a goth boyfriend and slapped me in front of him to try assert dominance over me, so I called the police on her. A few months ago my daughter Rachel started failing classes, which is something she has never done before as she was a straight A student. Around this same time, she started hanging out with a boy from school. He wears a lot of baggy clothing, weird haircut and wears ICP shirts every time I've seen him. I think my daughter is in love with her, because she now always paints her face before she goes out, with the exception of when she is going to school. She had about $500 saved up and I guess she went out and bought all these ICP shirts and hats. I didn't know what ICP was, so I googled it. I found that there is a culture around this band and they call themselves juggalos. I found a lot of negative stuff about juggalos, so naturally I was concerned. Some even consider it a gang. I brought this up with my daughter and asked her if she was on substances. This was about 2 weeks after she started dressing this way. She told me to mind my own business and slammed her bedroom door in my face. I waited a few days and tried to talk to her about it again. This time, she told me that I was being dumb and that she wasn't doing substances. I asked her why she was wearing face paint. She told me that it was no different than me wearing Kiss makeup when I went to one of their concerts years ago. I told her that I was going to a concert, not spending an hour doing makeup to walk 5 minutes to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk. The argument really didn't get anywhere and I decided to let it go. This was until we went out for our yearly Mother's Day dinner. We usually go to a decent restaurant and this year we decided to go to Macaroni Grill. While my daughter decided she was going to wear her face paint and ICP clothes to this dinner. I was ticked off and told her to go change. I told her that this wasn't a circus and we were celebrating her mother. She got very upset and yelled some profanity at me about how I am a horrible father. Because of this argument, we didn't go to dinner. I feel horrible about it for my wife's sake, and I did make it up to her the next day. Either way, up until last week my daughter and I had little contact and when I would try to talk to her, she gave me the silent treatment. This last weekend I found something no father wishes they would ever find. Call me a bad father for snooping, but I did. She was out doing her thing with this boy and I wanted to see if she had any substances in her room. I thought maybe I would find some grass. If I did, I would confiscate it and talk to her about it. But what I found was a white powdery substance in a small Ziploc bag. Being a former addict, I knew what it was. I went and talked with my wife about it and she was shocked. We didn't know what to do. Hours later, my daughter showed up at our home with this boy. I called her out about what I found and she completely lost it and told me I had no right to go through her things. After her yelling was finished, I asked the boy to leave and that this was a family matter. My daughter told me to F off, proceeded to literally slap me and took him to her room. My wife was crying and I was fuming. It took a lot not to slap her across the head but I maintained myself and didn't resort to that. What I did next is what I feel was the best thing I could do. I called the police on them. You can now check if there is a part 2 by pressing share and more. So I called the police on her. My wife is still very upset with me for this, but I didn't see another way to help her out short of physically forcing her boyfriend out on her to stay. Before the cops came I flushed the blow down the toilet, but they found that she had some grass. The boy was asked to leave and my daughter was told if she tried to leave, they would take her to a youth detention center for a few days. Well, since all of this, my daughter has been grounded and is not allowed to see this boy. It's easy for me to blame it all on the boy, but I am sure I failed somewhere for my girl to act this way. Apparently she is talking to my wife and asked her about going to some festival juggalos and ICP has. I looked it up and it sounds like bad news. My wife said she could go without talking to me. I am at a loss at this point. While I want my daughter to experience life, she seems to be headed down a dangerous road and my wife is enabling it. I did talk to my wife about it, and all she can say is that this is our way of making up for calling the cops on her. I thought about how I could make my wife see what my daughter has gotten herself into when it comes to this lifestyle, so I figured I could show my wife a couple of the videos about the festival she just gave her permission to attend and she was horrified by the substance. We agreed that my daughter would not be able to go without adult supervision. So, there's a guy I know who at some point has actually gone on tour with ICP and I reached out to him to talk about it. He had some interesting and good insight on them and made me realize that the problem here has little to do with the music my daughter is listening to. It is more about something she is going through and we need to figure it out along with her and help her. Now for our son. After my wife and I talked about the situation, we decided it would be best if we had a friendly conversation with our daughter. One that would not include yelling from my wife or myself, even if our daughter raised her voice. We were going to tell her our decision on the concert and see if we could find common ground on a few of the other issues. So last night, we sat her down when she had gotten back from hanging with her boyfriend. He came with her. He needed to grab something that was in her room. He stayed for 30 minutes before leaving. When he left, my wife and I asked our daughter if we could have a chat. She resisted at first and tried to walk away, but I said, "Please daughter, I just want to talk. I'm not going to yell. I just want to know what I can do to be a better father." It worked, even if she looked annoyed. Before I got into the substance use or ICP and face paint stuff, I asked her if she needed to talk to someone. She kind of just sat there. My wife asked her the same thing, with different phrasing so to see if she could get her to open up. At this point she started to tear up and I could tell she wanted to say something. I shut my mouth though, and continued to let my wife work on her opening up. Since we have been clashing, I didn't want to ruin this opportunity. After a few minutes, she basically stated she was still having a hard time about her best friend's aside. All this time, my wife and I thought she had moved forward with that, yet she was still trying to work through it. We all cried and after several months of her not allowing me not to hug her, She let me. You can now check if there is a part 3 by pressing share and more.